In the summer of 1212, 30,000 children walked out of their homes and never came back. This is not a legend. This is not a metaphor. It is one of the strangest and most devastating true stories of the entire Middle Ages. It began with a boy, a 12-year-old French shepherd named Stephen of Cloyes, who claimed that Jesus Christ himself had appeared to him in a field disguised as a pilgrim and handed him a letter for the King of France. The letter's message was simple. The children of Christendom must march to the Holy Land and reclaim Jerusalem. Where knights and kings had failed, innocence would succeed. And people believed him. Within weeks, thousands of children from villages across northern France abandoned their ploughs, their families, their entire lives. They gathered in flocks around Stephen, singing hymns, carrying crude wooden crosses, many of them barefoot. Parents tried to stop them. Priests begged them to turn back, but the children kept walking. Meanwhile, across the border in Germany, a separate movement was exploding. A boy named Nicholas of Cologne, barely older than Stephen, was leading his own army of young Germans south toward the Alps. Nicholas promised that God would part the Mediterranean Sea itself, and they would walk to Jerusalem on dry ground. 20,000 children followed him into the mountains. The Alpine crossing was catastrophic. Freezing temperatures, starvation, and mountain passes claimed hundreds of young lives. Children collapsed on rocky trails. Some turned back in despair. But Nicholas pressed on, and thousands survived to reach the Italian port city of Genoa. They stood on the harbor and waited for the miracle. The sea did not part. The children stared at the waves in disbelief. Their faith shattered on that shoreline like glass. Some wandered into the Italian countryside, begging for food, never to be heard from again. Back in France, Stephen's crusade met an even darker fate. Two merchants in the port city of Marseille, named Hugo Ferreus and William Porcus, offered to transport the children to the Holy Land for free. Out of Christian charity, they said. 7 ships set sail. 2 were wrecked in a storm near Sardinia. Every child aboard drowned. The other 5 ships sailed not to Jerusalem, but straight to the slave markets of North Africa. The merchants had sold the children to Arab slave traders. Thousands of French children vanished into slavery in Alexandria and Tunis. When word finally reached Pope Innocent III, he reportedly wept and whispered that these children shamed the adults of Christendom. But he did nothing to rescue them. No army was sent, no ransom was paid. The children's crusade was simply allowed to become a tragedy that Europe chose to forget. Historians still debate the details. Some scholars argue the participants were not all children, but included poor adults and dispossessed peasants. The Latin word pueri could mean both children and the powerless. But the core of the story holds. In 1212, the most vulnerable people in European society were consumed by a vision of divine purpose, exploited by the powerful and abandoned by every institution that should have protected them. 800 years later, that silence still echoes.